Drag that thing out here. I want everyone to see this.
Two bodyguards hauled Tiana onto the stage. Her knees buckled. Her mop cracked against the floor. 500 guests roared. Garrett Dawson snatched her wrist and jerked her under the spotlight, face twisted with disgust.
I caught this trash humming in my hallway while she scrubbed my toilets.
He shoved her forward.
This filthy nobody thinks she has a voice.
Phones everywhere. The crowd howled. A woman in the front row giggled into her palm. Tiana's chin quivered. Her eyes burned.
I was just cleaning.
Did I say you could speak?
He slammed the microphone against her chest.
Sing the song no one alive can sing. When you fail, scrub the stage on your knees while the world watches.
Her fingers wrapped around the mic, shaking. What came out of her mouth next didn't just silence the room. It ended a man's entire career. Before we get to that stage, before the lights, the cameras, the 500 faces, let's go back. Back to where it started. Back to a voice that never asked to be heard. Tiana Ingram was 19 years old. She lived in a one-bedroom apartment on the east side of Nashville with her grandmother Ruth Ingram, the kind of apartment where the radiator clanked louder than the TV, where dinner was sometimes rice and gravy and sometimes just rice. Ruth had been a gospel singer once, not famous, not rich, but the kind of singer who could make an entire church fall silent with one note. She'd sung in small congregations across Tennessee for 30 years before her lungs gave out. Emphysema took her stage. It never took her ear. She started teaching Tiana when the girl was 5. Not lessons, not the kind you pay for. Just the two of them at the kitchen table, Ruth, humming a line, Tiana repeating it, over and over, night after night, year after year. God gave you something, baby, Ruth used to say, something that don't belong to this world. Don't you ever let nobody steal it. Tiana believed her. She just didn't believe it mattered, because in Tiana's world, talent didn't pay rent. So, at 17, she dropped out of school. At 18, she got a job. Night shift custodial staff at the Harrington Concert Hall, the most prestigious music venue in Nashville. The same stage where legends had performed, the same floors that now needed mopping at 2 in the morning. She showed up every night, clocked in, pulled on her uniform, pushed her cart down the same hallways where Grammy winners walked hours earlier. Nobody looked at her. Nobody spoke to her. The security guards nodded sometimes. That was it. But Tiana had a secret. Every night after the last light went off and the last door clicked shut, she would leave her mop by the wings and walk to center stage. The seats were empty. The spotlight was cold. The silence was so thick she could hear her own heartbeat, and she would sing. Not for anyone, not for anything. Just because it was the only time in her life she felt like she existed. Her voice would fill that empty hall like water filling a cathedral. No microphone, no audience. Just her and the ghost of every note that had ever bounced off those walls. She sang gospel. She sang soul. She sang things she'd never heard before, melodies that came from somewhere deep, somewhere she couldn't name. Some nights she'd hit notes so high the crystal chandelier above the balcony would hum in response. She didn't know that. She never looked up. But someone else did. Eddie Collins, the venue's night shift sound engineer, had heard her. Not once, not twice. Over 100 times. He'd sit in the booth with his headphones off, listening through the walls. He never told her. He never told anyone. He just listened. And one night, without thinking, he pressed record. That recording sat on his hard drive for 8 months, untouched, unshared, a secret he kept because he knew if the wrong person heard it, they'd either steal it or destroy it. He was right about that. Now, Garrett Dawson. You've seen his face on billboards. You've heard his voice on every streaming platform. 6 platinum records, 2 world tours, 40 million followers. The kind of fame that makes people forget to ask whether it's real. Here's what Garrett's fans didn't know: he hadn't sung a single live note in over 3 years. Every concert, every TV appearance, every award show pitch-corrected, auto-tuned, engineered to perfection by a team of 6 audio technicians who signed ND as thicker than phone books. Garrett's real voice, thin, flat, the kind of voice that wouldn't survive an open mic night at a dive bar. But the image that was flawless. And the image was everything. When Garrett booked the Harrington for his exclusive VIP concert, 500 guests, industry, elite journalists, influencers, A-list names, the venue manager pulled Tiana aside. "You stay backstage. You stay invisible. You do not go anywhere near the main hall." Understood. Tiana nodded. She understood. She always understood. She didn't know that in 6 hours, she'd be standing on that same stage, not with a mop, but with a microphone. And the man who put it in her hands would spend the rest of his life wishing he hadn't. 30 minutes before showtime, the hallway behind the main stage smelled like fresh polish and expensive cologne. Garrett's crew moved through like a parade, stylists' assistants, photographers, a woman carrying nothing but a tray of sparkling water. Tiana was on her hands and knees in the corridor, scrubbing a scuff mark off the baseboard. She had her earbuds in, except they weren't playing anything. They were dead. She just wore them so people wouldn't talk to her. The hallway was empty, or so she thought. She started humming first, low, barely a whisper. Then the melody opened the way it always did when she forgot herself, one of Grandma Ruth's songs, a hymn about grace that Ruth used to sing while washing dishes. Tiana's voice floated through the corridor like smoke, soft, warm, impossible to ignore. Garrett heard it first. He stopped mid-step. His manager, Phil Bradshaw, nearly walked into him. "What the hell is that?" Garrett said. Phil looked down the hallway. That's the cleaning girl." For 3 seconds, Garrett didn't speak. His jaw tightened. His fingers curled at his sides. Something flickered behind his eyes. Something quick and ugly. Not amusement, not curiosity, recognition. He knew that sound. He knew what real talent sounded like. And he knew it was everything he'd been faking for years. The moment passed. The mask came back. Well. He walked toward her slowly. Tiana looked up, pulled out her earbuds. "The mop girl thinks she's Whitney Houston." 2 assistants laughed behind him. Tiana said nothing. She lowered her eyes and reached for her bucket. No, don't stop on my account." He crouched down to her level, close enough that she could smell his cologne. "Sing for me, sweetheart. Right here on the floor, where you belong." She didn't answer. Her knuckles whitened around the scrub brush. Garrett stood up, straightened his cuffs, turned to Phil with a grin that had nothing warm in it. "Keep this one close tonight. I just had an idea." Phil glanced at Tiana, then back at Garrett. He didn't ask questions. He never did. "Make sure she doesn't leave the building." The concert started at 8. Tiana heard it through the walls. She was backstage, emptying trash cans, stacking crates, wiping down counters no one would see. The bass thumped through the concrete. The crowd screamed on cue. Garrett Dawson was out there doing what he did, best performing. But Tiana had spent 2 years in this building. 2 years listening to every artist who graced that stage. She knew what live vocals sounded like through these walls. She knew the way real voices bled through concrete, imperfect, textured, alive. What she heard tonight was none of those things. The voice coming through those walls was too clean, too smooth, too perfect. Like someone had ironed every wrinkle out of a human soul. He was faking it. Every note, every run, every high she'd heard on the radio manufactured. Tiana stopped wiping. She stood still in that dim corridor and listened. And she knew. She didn't have time to think about what that meant. The door to the backstage hallway burst open. Phil Bradshaw walked in with 2 security guards. "You?" Phil pointed at her. Come with us. I didn't do anything. I didn't ask. Move. They grabbed her arms, one on each side. Her cleaning cart rolled into the wall behind her. They marched her through the corridor, past the dressing rooms, past the crew station toward the side entrance of the stage. She could hear the crowd now, not through walls, through a thin curtain. Wait, what's happening? Where are you taking me? Phil didn't answer. He just held the curtain open, and that's when the light hit her face. 500 people, 500 phones, the roar of a crowd that had already been told a joke was coming. Her chest locked, her legs went soft. Every instinct told her to turn around, run, disappear back into the hallways where no one could see her. She could disappear. She was good at that. Then she heard it. Not from the speakers, not from the crowd. From somewhere deep, a voice that sounded like warm water and Sunday morning. Don't you ever let nobody steal it. Tiana stopped pulling, her spine straightened, her breath steadied. She didn't walk onto that stage. She stepped. The laughter started before she even reached the microphone. Garrett Dawson was already at center stage, one hand raised to quiet the crowd just enough to hear himself. He didn't need to try hard. 500 people hung on every word. All right. I've got a surprise for you tonight. He paced the stage like he owned the air above it. Now you all paid a lot of money to be here. Champagne, caviar, the best sound system in Nashville. He paused, let the silence build. But sometimes, real entertainment shows up where you least expect it. He turned toward the wings and snapped his fingers. The spotlight swung. And there she was, Tiana Ingram, standing at the edge of the stage like a deer caught in headlights. The crowd murmured. A few people squinted, confused. Then someone in the third row said it loud enough to carry. Is that the janitor? Garrett grinned. Ladies and gentlemen, I caught this one singing in my hallway tonight, while she was mopping my hallway. He let that land. Now she thinks she actually believes that she has what it takes to stand on this stage. The room crackled with laughter. Not polite laughter. The kind that comes from above. The kind that pushes down. A man near the bar raised his glass. Let her try, this should be good. A woman 3 rows back whispered to her date, This is cruel. Her date shrugged and kept filming. Garrett walked to Tiana, slowly, every step deliberate. He circled her once, the way you'd circle something you found on the bottom of your shoe. You want to sing fine. He leaned into the mic. Let's give her the real thing. Not some gospel hymn from the back of a bus. He looked at his sound engineer, offstage. Pull up track 9. The room got quiet. The musicians on standby exchanged glances. Track 9. Everyone in the industry knew track 9. It was the song that had broken 3 professional vocalists in live competition, a 4-octave monster that demanded control power and precision in measures most human throats simply could not produce. The highest note sat in a register so extreme that vocal coaches used it as a cautionary tale. It was the song Garrett had recorded in studio with 7 layers of pitch correction and never once attempted live. Sing this, Garrett said. He didn't look at her. He looked at the audience. The whole thing, start to finish. No backing track, no help, just your little voice and this microphone. He held the mic out with 2 fingers, like handing a toy to a child. And when you can't, when your voice cracks and the whole room hears it, you're going to walk to that closet backstage, get your mop and clean this stage, on your knees, in front of everyone here. Deal. He didn't wait for an answer. He pressed the mic into her hand and walked to the side of the stage, arms crossed, leaning against a speaker like a man watching a bonfire. Tiana held the microphone. It was heavier than she expected, or maybe her arms were just that tired. The track intro played. Soft piano, a slow build. She had 8 bars before the vocal entry. She looked out at the crowd. 500 faces, some grinning, some pitying, some already bored. Phones glowed like a field of cold stars. She thought about running. Her legs knew the way. Back through the curtain down the hallway, out the service exit, into the Nashville night where no one would see her. She could disappear. She was good at that. 4 bars left. She closed her eyes. And for 1 second, she wasn't on a stage. She was in Grandma Ruth's kitchen, 5 years old, standing on a step stool, Ruth's hand on her shoulder, the melody simple, unbreakable, infinite. 2 bars. She opened her eyes, lifted the mic, and began. The first note came out thin, fragile, like a candle flame in a drafty room. A few people in the front shifted uncomfortably. Someone coughed. Garrett smiled. The second note was different. It wasn't louder, it was deeper, fuller. Like a door opening in a room everyone thought was sealed shut. The murmuring stopped, not all at once in patches spreading outward from the front row, like ripples in still water. By the third line, Tiana's voice had found the floor. Not the stage floor, the floor of the song, the foundation, beneath the melody, where breath becomes sound, and sound becomes something that lives inside your chest. She climbed, line by line, note by note, each one higher, wider, more impossible than the last. Her voice didn't strain. It expanded. The way a river doesn't fight the canyon, it fills it. The audience stopped filming, not because they chose to, because their hands forgot what they were doing. A woman in the second row pressed both palms flat against her cheeks. The man who'd raised his glass at the bar set it down and didn't pick it up again. And then came the note, the one that shouldn't exist in a human throat, the one that vocal coaches call a myth, the one Garrett had auto-tuned 11 times in studio and still couldn't get right. Tiana hit it the way the sun hits the horizon, effortless, inevitable, like it was always supposed to be there. The note filled the Harrington from floor to ceiling. It pressed against the walls. It rattled the chandelier above the balcony, the same chandelier that had hummed for her in the dark, alone, 100 nights before. But tonight it wasn't humming. Tonight it was ringing. Garrett's smile was gone. His arms had uncrossed. His hands hung at his sides, like they'd forgotten their purpose. His mouth was slightly open. His eyes, for the first time in his career, were not performing. They were witnessing. He knew. In that moment, standing in the wings with 500 people on their feet, and the sound of something holy pouring from a girl he'd dragged out of a hallway, he knew. She was everything he'd pretended to be. Tiana held the last note for 6 full seconds, eyes closed, hands at her sides, the microphone barely touching her lips, her body still, completely still. Like the song was holding her up, not the other way around. Then silence. 1 second, 2, 3. The first person to stand was the woman who'd said, "This is cruel." She stood with tears running down her face, and her hands already moving. Then the row behind her, then the balcony, then the entire hall, 500 people, on their feet, not clapping, roaring. The sound crashed over the stage like a wave breaking against a cliff. Tiana opened her eyes. She didn't bow. She didn't smile. She blinked slowly, like someone waking up from a dream they weren't sure was real. In the fourth row, a man who'd been sitting quietly all evening rose to his feet, slower than everyone else. He didn't clap. He just stood there, hands folded in front of him, watching her with the kind of stillness that only comes from people who've spent 50 years listening for exactly this. Nobody in that room knew his name. Not yet, but they would. The applause wouldn't stop. Garrett stood at the edge of the stage, 6 feet from Tiana, and he could feel it. The room had shifted. The 500 people who'd paid to see him weren't looking at him anymore. They were looking at her. The girl who had no business being on that stage. The girl he'd put there as a joke. And the joke had eaten him alive. He moved fast. 2 strides. He plucked the microphone from Tiana's hand, before she could blink. His fingers wrapped around it, the way a man grabs a steering wheel in a skid-tight, white-knuckled desperate. "Well," his voice boomed through the speakers with manufactured cheer. "How about that, folks? A little surprise entertainment from our hard-working staff." He threw an arm around Tiana's shoulders. Casual performative, the way you'd pose with a prop. "Let's give her a hand and get back to the show." But the crowd didn't follow his lead. "Let her sing another one." The shout came from somewhere near the balcony, then another voice, then another. A rhythm started, palms hitting thighs, feet stomping floors. The chant rose like a tide. "One more, one more, one more." Tiana stood frozen. She didn't understand what was happening. 15 minutes ago, these people had laughed at her. Now they were calling her name, a name most of them didn't even know. Garrett's jaw clenched so hard, the muscles in his neck twitched. He turned his back to the audience and locked eyes with Phil Bradshaw in the wings. The look said everything. "Fix this. Now." Phil disappeared. Garrett faced the crowd again. The grin was back, wider, sharper, emptier. "She's got an early shift tomorrow, folks. Floors don't clean themselves." He laughed alone. The audience didn't laugh with him. For the first time in his career, a room full of people stared at Garrett Dawson in silence. Tiana felt a hand close around her elbow. Then, another on her opposite arm. 2 security guards, the same ones who dragged her out here. "Ma'am, you need to come with us." "What, but?" "I didn't, Now." They pulled her off stage, not gently, not carefully. The way you remove something unwanted. The curtain swallowed her, and just like that, the light was gone. Backstage, Phil was waiting. "Badge," he said. No greeting, no explanation, just his open palm. "I don't understand, he told me to." "You went on stage during a live event without authorization. That's a Category 1 violation. Badge, now." Tiana's hands were shaking. She unclipped her employee badge, the one with her photo, the one she'd carried for 2 years, the one that led her into the building where she'd sung 100 secret songs, and placed it in Phil's hand. He didn't look at it. He dropped it into his jacket pocket like it was a receipt. "Your final check will be mailed. Don't come back to this building." "But he dragged me." "I don't care what happened on stage. You're done here." She stood in that hallway, the same hallway where she'd been scrubbing a scuff mark 90 minutes ago. The bass from the concert still thumped through the walls. Garrett was back on stage. The show was continuing, as if she'd never existed. A security guard walked her to the service exit. He didn't speak. He held the door open. The Nashville night poured in warm air, distant sirens, the hum of a city that didn't know her name. She stepped outside. The door locked behind her. It started to rain before she reached the bus stop. She walked the rest of the way home. 40 minutes, no umbrella, no phone. She'd left it in her locker, and her locker was inside a building she'd never enter again. When she reached the apartment, the porch light was on. Grandma Ruth was sitting in the chair by the window. She always sat there when Tiana worked late. Always. Ruth took one look at her granddaughter, soaked, trembling, empty-handed, and didn't ask a single question. She just opened her arms. Tiana collapsed into them. What neither of them knew, what no one knew, yet was that inside the Harrington 500 phones had already done what no record label, no manager, no industry, gatekeeper could stop. The videos were uploading, and the internet doesn't sleep. By 6 the next morning, Tiana Ingram was the most searched name in America. She didn't know it. She was asleep on the couch, still in last night's clothes, her grandmother's blanket pulled up to her chin. The rain had stopped. The apartment was quiet. Her phone was still locked inside a building she'd never enter again. But outside those walls, the internet was on fire. The first video hit Twitter at 11:47 p.m. 43 seconds of shaky footage, shot from the 5th row. A girl standing under a spotlight. A voice that didn't match the picture. Within an hour, it had 2 million views. By midnight, 14 different angles of the same performance were circulating. By dawn, the number had passed 20 million. Hashtag cleaning lady voice trended in every English-speaking country on the planet. The comments came in waves. I've been to 3 of Garrett Dawson's concerts. This girl just made all of them feel like a lie. She's standing there in a work uniform hitting notes that trained singers can't touch. Who is she? Someone find this woman and give her a record deal before I lose my mind. Garrett forced her up there to embarrass her. Watch his face at 038. That's not confidence. That's fear. That last comment, the one about his face, became its own thread. People slowed the footage down. Frame by frame. The moment Tiana hit the impossible note, Garrett's expression collapsed. Not surprise, not admiration, terror. The kind that only comes when you realize the thing you've been hiding has just been exposed by the thing you tried to destroy. The clip was replayed, slowed, analyzed, memmed. It became the most screenshot moment of the year. News vans started arriving in East Nashville before noon. Reporters knocked on doors. Neighbors pointed down the street. Nobody knew her last name. Nobody had her number. Inside the apartment, Ruth turned off the TV when the first story aired. She sat beside her granddaughter on the couch and let her sleep. Meanwhile, somewhere across the city, a man sat in a hotel suite, watching the same video for the 11th time. He hadn't slept either. He picked up his phone and made one call. "Find her," he said, "before anyone else does." Garrett Dawson didn't sleep that night either, but not for the same reasons. He sat in his penthouse suite at the Vanderbilt Grand scrolling. Every refresh brought a new headline, a new clip, a new comment comparing his voice to hers, and every single comparison ended the same way. He lost. By noon, the hashtag Garrett Exposed was climbing right behind hashtag Cleaning Lady Voice. Someone had pulled a clip from a concert in Atlanta 2 years ago where his earpiece malfunctioned mid-song. For 11 seconds, the raw feed caught his real voice. Thin, reedy. Cracking on a note that wouldn't challenge a high school choir kid, the clip had been buried by his legal team within hours of the original upload. Now it was back, and it had 40 million views. Garrett called Phil Bradshaw at 6 a.m. Kill it. Phil knew exactly what that meant. Within 24 hours, Garrett's PR machine went to war. Not against another celebrity. Not against a rival label. Against a 19-year-old girl who cleaned floors for a living. First came the statement, released through Garrett's publicist to every major entertainment outlet simultaneously during last night's exclusive event. An unauthorized individual disrupted the performance by accessing the stage without permission. The individual, a temporary custodial contractor, has been terminated. Mr. Dawson's team is reviewing potential legal action for trespassing and disruption of a private event. Temporary custodial contractor. Not even her name. Not even the word woman. Then came the Whisper campaign. Garrett's digital team, 12 people, whose only job was to manage his online image, seeded the narrative across every platform. Heard she had a pitch corrector hidden in her clothes. My cousin works at Harrington. She's been warned twice before for going on stage after hours. It's all staged. She's an actress. Wake up. The trolls multiplied. Bot accounts, burner profiles, reply threads that turned every supportive comment into a battleground. Within 48 hours, Tiana's name wasn't just trending, it was a war zone. Then Garrett made it personal. He went on a late-night podcast, one with 8 million subscribers, and laughed about the whole thing. Casual, easy, the way powerful men laugh when they want you to know they aren't threatened. Look, I feel bad for the girl. I really do. He leaned back in his chair. But let's be real. She's a cleaner. She cleans toilets. And people want to give her a record deal because of one viral moment. He shook his head. That's not how this industry works. Talent isn't enough. You need discipline, training, years of sacrifice. You can't just mop your way to a Grammy. The host laughed. The comment section didn't. Mop your way to a Grammy. That phrase hit the internet like gasoline on a fire. It became the rallying cry for everyone who'd ever been told they weren't good enough because of where they came from. Back in the apartment on the east side of Nashville, Tiana sat on the bathroom floor with the door locked. She'd made the mistake of borrowing her neighbor's phone. 20 minutes of scrolling. 20 minutes of strangers calling her a fraud, a liar, a nobody who got lucky. She couldn't breathe. The walls felt like they were closing in. Ruth knocked. "Baby, open the door." "They're saying I faked it, Grandma." "I know what they're saying. They're saying I don't deserve—" "Open this door." Tiana did. Ruth stood there, steady, solid, unmovable. She took her granddaughter's face in both hands. "Listen to me. They took your job. They took your badge. They put your name in the dirt." Her voice was quiet, firm, the same voice that had carried hymns across Tennessee for 30 years. "But they cannot take your voice. Not him. Not his lawyers. Not a million strangers on the internet. Your voice belongs to you, and it always will." Tiana closed her eyes. Tears ran down her cheeks. She didn't wipe them. She nodded. What neither of them knew, what Garrett didn't know either, was that 3 floors above a recording studio in downtown Nashville, Phil Bradshaw was in a meeting with Garrett's audio engineers. And he said something he shouldn't have. "If anyone pulls the raw masters from the last album, if anyone finds the pitch correction layers, we're done. All of us. Make sure those files are locked." He said it to 4 people in a closed room. One of them was already thinking about who to call. The first call came on a Tuesday. Tiana was sitting at the kitchen table stirring a cup of coffee she hadn't tasted. Ruth was across from her, reading the newspaper, the old-fashioned way, ink on fingers, glasses low on her nose. Neither of them had turned on the TV in 3 days. The neighbor's phone buzzed, the same one Tiana had borrowed to read the comments. She almost didn't answer. "Tiana, my name is Eddie Collins. I was the night shift sound engineer at the Harrington." She didn't say anything. "You don't know me, but I know you. I've heard you sing on that stage over 100 times. After midnight, when you thought nobody was listening." Her throat tightened. "You heard me. Every night, for 2 years." He paused. "And the night of the concert when Garrett pulled you on stage, I was in the booth. The mic they gave you was dead. The house system wasn't routed to it. You wouldn't have been heard past the 3rd row." Silence. "I turned it on. I patched you into the main speakers. That's why your voice carried through the entire hall." Tiana closed her eyes. She didn't know what to say. "I have something else," Eddie continued. "The raw audio from that night, unprocessed, no filters, no effects, no pitch correction, just your voice, pure. I can prove to anyone who asks that what came out of that microphone was 100% real." That was the first domino. The second came from Claire Sanderson. Claire was a music journalist, 14 years in the industry. She'd written for Rolling Stone, Billboard, Pitchfork. And for the last 2 years, she'd been chasing a story no editor would let her publish, the story of Garrett Dawson's manufactured voice. She had fragments, anonymous tips from former audio engineers, metadata from studio sessions that showed impossible vocal corrections, a source at his label who'd confirmed the auto-tune but refused to go on record. She had everything except proof. Then 500 phones gave it to her. Claire watched the concert videos 40 times. She ran spectral analysis on the audio, comparing Tiana's raw vocal signature against Garrett's studio recordings. The results weren't even close. Tiana's voice was organic complex, layered with natural harmonics. Garrett's was synthetic, digitally sculpted, a deepfake made of sound, but she still needed the masters. the original studio files that would show the correction layers. Without them, the story was allegation, not evidence. That's when the third domino fell. A number Claire didn't recognize, a voice she'd never heard, someone who'd been sitting in a room when Phil Bradshaw said something he shouldn't have. I can get you the files, the raw masters from the last 3 albums, every track, every correction layer, everything. Why? Because I watched that girl stand on a stage and sing the truth while the man who pays my salary has been lying for a decade, and I can't do this anymore. Claire had her story. Meanwhile, something smaller, but no less important, was happening. A local podcast in Nashville, The Unrehearsed, reached out to Tiana through Eddie. The host was a former session musician. She didn't want drama, she didn't want controversy, she just wanted to hear Tiana sing. Tiana almost said no, Ruth said yes. They drove to the studio in Eddie's truck. No manager, no label, no contract. Just a girl, her grandmother, and a sound engineer who'd kept her secret for 2 years. The podcast was simple, a conversation, a few questions. And then at the end, the host asked, "Would you sing something for us, anything? No track, no accompaniment, just you." Tiana closed her eyes, and she sang, a cappella, unfiltered, the same voice that had filled the Harrington Concert Hall, the same voice that had rattled a chandelier in the dark. The episode went live that afternoon. By evening, it had been downloaded 3 million times. The debate was over. There was no hidden device, no trick, no studio magic, just a voice that didn't belong to this world. And in a hotel suite across the city, a man named Wallace Pemberton set his phone down on the table and picked up a different one, the private line, the one only 15 people in the music industry had the number to. "Eddie Collins," he said to the voice on the other end. "Get me Eddie Collins." The Nashville Music Awards aired live on a Sunday night. 38 million viewers. Every major network, every streaming platform, the kind of audience that turns moments into history. Claire Sanderson's article dropped 6 hours before the broadcast. The headline alone shook the industry to its foundation. The voice that never was, inside Garrett Dawson's decade of deception. 14 pages, spectral analysis, raw studio masters, showing correction layers stacked so deep the original vocal was unrecognizable. Testimony from 3 former audio engineers. Metadata timestamps. Internal communications between Phil Bradshaw and the label's mastering team. It wasn't an allegation, it was an autopsy. By the time the red carpet opened, every phone in every pocket was buzzing with the same story. Reporters shouted questions at Garrett's SUV as it pulled up. His team hustled him inside through a service entrance. The cameras caught it anyway. His face tight gray, stripped of every performance he'd ever given. The ceremony began. The host made a joke about auto-tune. The audience laughed nervously. Everyone was waiting. Garrett's category came third, Live Performer of the Year. The irony was so heavy, the air tasted like metal. His name was read. The applause was thin. He walked to the podium, reached for the trophy. The host stepped forward. "Before we present this award, the Academy has a request." The room went still. In light of recent reporting, we believe the public deserves clarity. Tonight, we're asking both nominees in this category to perform. Live. The same song, no backing track, no pitch correction, no audio processing of any kind. The host looked directly at Garrett. Just the voice. And the truth. A murmur swept through the hall, like wind through a canyon. Garrett's hand was still reaching for the trophy. It froze. "Mr. Dawson, you'll perform first." The band started. A stripped arrangement, piano and strings, nothing to hide behind. Garrett took the microphone. His hand was steady, years of performing had given him that much. But his throat hadn't performed in a decade. Not really. Not without the invisible hands of 6 technicians holding every note in place. He began. The first line was passable, tight, controlled, the kind of singing that survives on technique alone. The second line cracked, not badly, not dramatically, just enough, a hairline fracture in a glass wall. The audience heard it. He heard it. He pushed harder, his jaw locked, his neck strained, sweat rolled down his temple. The third line broke. The note, the one that defined the song, the one that separated professionals from legends, came out flat, hollow, like a bell that had been struck too many times. He tried to recover, pushed higher. His voice splintered into something thin and desperate and unmistakably human. He stopped, mid-phrase, mid-breath. The microphone dropped to his side. 38 million people watched him stand there, silent, finished. The host stepped forward again, quiet, respectful. "Miss Ingram, whenever you're ready." Tiana walked out from the wings. No entourage, no stylist, no team of handlers whispering in her ear. Just her. She took the microphone, looked out at the audience, looked at the cameras, looked at Garrett still standing at the edge of the stage, unable to leave, unable to look away. She didn't say anything. She just breathed. And then she sang. The same song, the same notes, the same impossible architecture of melody that had broken Garrett 60 seconds ago. But from her, it wasn't a test. It wasn't a performance. It was a conversation between her voice and every empty seat she'd ever sung to at 2 a.m. She climbed through the verses like someone walking up a staircase in their own home, familiar, certain, unhurried. And when she reached the note, the one she didn't attack it. She didn't reach for it. She opened her mouth and it was already there. The note filled the auditorium the way sunrise fills a valley. Not sudden, not violent, just inevitable. Total, everywhere at once. The first person to stand was a cellist in the orchestra pit, then a cameraman behind the third row, then an entire balcony. 38 million people, watching, listening, crying. Garrett stood at the edge of the stage, his head dropped, his hand pressed against his mouth. His eyes were red, not from anger, from recognition. The same recognition he'd felt in that hallway, the one he'd tried to bury, with lawyers and trolls and a podcast punchline. She was real. She had always been real. And he had never been anything close. Tiana held the final note. Eyes closed, still, the way she always was. The way she'd always been on that empty stage at midnight. When the note ended, the silence lasted 4 seconds. Then the world broke open. A man rose from the second row. Wallace Pemberton, 50 years in the music industry, more Grammys on his shelf than most people had books. He walked to the stage, past security, past the host, straight to Tiana. He extended his hand. She took it. And in front of 38 million witnesses, he said 5 words into the nearest microphone. Welcome to Pemberton Records, Tiana. The fall of Garrett Dawson didn't happen all at once. It happened the way a building collapses after the foundation cracks floor by floor in full view of everyone who ever stood inside it. His label dropped him first. Meridian Records released a statement 72 hours after the awards ceremony. 4 sentences, no apology, no explanation. Just the words, effective immediately, and we wish him well in future endeavors. The kind of goodbye the industry gives to people it wants to forget it ever knew. The tour was next. 36 dates across North America, sold out, or they had been. Refund requests crashed the ticketing servers within a day. Venues pulled out one by one. Promoters stopped returning calls. The merchandise, the shirts, the posters, the $200 VIP lanyards sat in warehouses with nowhere to go. Then came the sponsors. Energy drinks, headphone brands, a luxury watch company that had built an entire campaign around his face. Gone. All of them. Not because of the music, because of the lie. Consumers don't forgive deception. They especially don't forgive deception that came wrapped in cruelty toward a 19-year-old girl. Phil Bradshaw disappeared from public life, deleted his socials, changed his number. Rumor was he'd moved to a small town in Colorado. Nobody bothered to confirm it. Garrett himself gave one final interview, a pre-recorded segment for a morning show. No live audience, no studio crowd, just a chair, a camera, and a man whose face looked 10 years older than it had a month ago. "I made mistakes," he said. His voice was flat, rehearsed. Even now, even at the end, he couldn't stop performing. "I let the pressure of the industry push me into choices I'm not proud of." He never said her name, not once. The internet noticed. Now Tiana. The week after the awards, Wallace Pemberton sat across from her at a diner in East Nashville. Not a boardroom, not a corner office, a diner. Because Eddie Collins told him that's where she'd be comfortable. Pemberton slid a contract across the table. Tiana looked at it, looked at Ruth, who was sitting beside her, looked at Eddie, who was 2 booths away, pretending to read a menu. "I don't want to be famous," Tiana said. Pemberton nodded. "I don't want you to be famous. I want you to be heard." She signed it with a pen Ruth pulled from her purse, the same pen Ruth had used to write hymn lyrics in the margins of her Bible for 40 years. The first album was recorded at the Harrington Concert Hall. Tiana requested it specifically, not because she had something to prove, but because that building held every midnight melody she'd ever sung to empty seats. It held the echo of every note she'd offered to no one, and she wanted to give those ghosts an audience. Eddie Collins ran the soundboard, not as a favor, as her personal sound engineer, officially hired, officially credited, officially part of the team. The man who'd pressed record in the dark was now pressing record in the light. Ruth sat in the front row of the empty hall during every session. She didn't give notes. She didn't critique. She just sat there with her hands in her lap and her eyes closed, listening to her granddaughter's voice fill the room the way it had filled their kitchen for 14 years. Sometimes between takes, Tiana would look out from the stage and see her grandmother's lips moving. Not singing, praying. The album debuted at #1. But that wasn't the part that mattered most. 6 months after the concert that changed everything, the Harrington Concert Hall unveiled a new addition. A rehearsal room on the 3rd floor, open to the public, free to use, available to any musician signed or unsigned, trained or untrained, known or unknown, who needed a space to practice. The plaque on the door read, "The Tiana Ingram Room," and below it, in smaller letters, "Don't you ever let nobody steal it." The cleaning staff at the Harrington received a raise that year, a real one, not symbolic. Their break room was moved from the basement to the 2nd floor. Their names were printed in every concert program under a new section, with gratitude to the team that makes this stage possible. Tiana insisted on that last part. Pemberton made it happen. Late on a Thursday night, long after the last audience had filed out and the stage lights had cooled, a door opened at the back of the Harrington Concert Hall. Tiana walked in alone, not through the service entrance, through the front doors. The ones with the brass handles and etched glass. The ones she used to polish every Tuesday. The hall was dark, the seats were empty, the chandelier hung silent above the balcony, the same one that had hummed for her in the quiet. The same one that had rung for her in front of 500 strangers. She walked to center stage. No microphone, no spotlight, no audience. She stood exactly where she'd stood on the worst night of her life, and exactly where she'd stood on the best one. She closed her eyes, and she sang. The same song Grandma Ruth had taught her at the kitchen table. The one about grace. The one that started with a hum and ended with something that sounded like the whole world breathing in at once. Her voice filled the empty hall the way it always had. No applause, no cameras, no millions watching. Just her, just the sound, just the ghost of a woman who'd told a 5-year-old girl that her voice didn't belong to this world. She was right. When the last note faded, Tiana opened her eyes. She looked at the empty seats, and for the first time she smiled. Not for the cameras, not for the record deal, not for the 38 million people who'd watched her prove a liar wrong. For herself, because she'd always had the voice. She just needed the world to shut up long enough to hear it. If you were standing on that stage in a uniform, you didn't choose in front of people who already decided you were nothing, would you have opened your mouth or walked away? There's one detail most people miss. Go back to the moment Garrett first heard Tiana sing in that hallway. Don't listen to what he said. Watch what his face did. That's the moment he knew. If this story stayed with you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And subscribe. There are more voices out there the world hasn't heard yet.
A man with 6 platinum records dragged a 19-year cleaning lady on stage to destroy her, handed her the one song nobody alive can sing, and she didn't just sing it, she ended his entire career. But here's what really stayed with me. It's not the voice, it's not the record deal, it's Grandma Ruth, sitting by that window every night, waiting for her granddaughter to come home from mopping floors at 2 a.m. Never once saying, "Be realistic," the sick was, "Don't you ever let nobody steal it." Tiana didn't find her voice on that stage. It has it since she was 5, standing on a stacked stool in her grandmother's kitchen. What she found that night was the world finally forced to shut up and listen. How many Tianas are out there right now, working doubles, carrying something extraordinary inside them that nobody's ever noticed? Maybe you know one, maybe you are one, maybe somebody told you where you come from decides where you end up, and part of you believed it. Let this story undo that. Tell me in the comments if you were on the stage, 500 people already laughing, would you sing or walk away? If this hit you, say it. Someone needs to hear it tonight. Subscribe. There are more voices out there the world hasn't heard yet.